Matt, this is Jim.
Oh, great. Go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
Matt, this is Jim Tate. I just wanted to say that you've already started off with the two right people, the two people who know what they're talking about. I'm just signing in from the hospital room, and want to thank Bobby for letting me participate in the creation of the show that he puts on with his latest sighting. He's done wonders there. In response to the kinds of things Tim has been saying, we know so much more about the Ivory-billed woodpecker than we did in the Tanner days, that I think you're on the right track. After all, they were standing around under a tree with a pair with young that were under stress. They were making noises that they probably didn't normally make, noises that you can't consider normal for a bird that you are trying to seek out with long-term calls and long-distance calls. And just let it go at that, and thank you all for letting me cooperate.
Well, great. Well, Jim, I mean, just so we're clear, I'll just state briefly. Hi, I'm Matt Cortman. My wife, Lauren, does all the work.
Hello, I'm Lauren. Hi.
Welcome to our Zoom. I just want to say how great it is. That was Jim Tate, who was the science advisor to the Secretary of Interior during the 2004 and 2005. There was a 2005, I think it was April, announcement of the Big Woods Rediscover the Ivory-billed Woodpecker. But we're thrilled to have you tonight. In general, the point of these Zooms is to have as candid a meeting as possible. So what we'll do is we'll go through, I'll have a brief introduction, and then Bobby will present his video and ask you to hold your questions to the end. Tim Gallagher then will give his thoughts, and Jim Tate, and if you want to give some thoughts also, that'd be great. And then we'll open it up for questions. I might interrupt Bobby briefly if there's some informational question that I think the audience might not understand. But other than that, this is going to be Bobby's show. So I just wanted to say maybe two quick points about why I think this is such an important meeting. First of all, one of the failings I think in Ivorybill world is there isn't enough real-time dialogue. So this is why we present Ivorybill experts to come on, and if you have questions, this is great. So we're thrilled that Bobby and Tim are with us, and Jim Tate to answer your questions. And the other thing we wanted to stress that's so important about this is the nature of being able to watch Bobby's Zoom.
I'm going to say this real quick, y'all. This is just a note about resolution in videos, because we've had some discussion with people about it, a little bit of confusion about it. Anything that's screen shared, sorry to read this to y'all, but I think it's really important. Anything that's screen shared in real time through online meeting platforms, it's not just Zoom, there's so many others that work the same way. It'll come through to the participants as being really close to the resolution that's on the sharer's computer. So for instance, Bobby's going to share, along with his actual discussion, like analysis and everything of his video. When he shares his video, it's going to be as close as possible to the actual resolution on his computer. Now, obviously, it's coming through the internet. It's a lot of things are going to affect that, including your internet connection, but that's just important to state. So the problem is, anytime you make a recording through one of these platforms, the resolution is automatically lowered. So I'll just move on with that. This makes what you see in real time in a meeting much clearer than what it is after the fact. So for instance, Bobby's already given this presentation twice recently with, is it Birdwatching Daily magazine with Matt Mendenhall, and also with Fish and Wildlife Service. And with both of those, the video, when he shared it in real time, was much clearer, much crisper, because it was close to the real resolution in real time. But the way that it works with these meeting platforms is that it's automatically going to knock down the resolution. So for instance, even with our Zoom account, we have it set to Group HD. That's supposed to mean that every single person who shares something would be able to share in high definition. Problem is, it caps that resolution at 720p, which is actually pretty low. Most people's TVs now are 4K, so that's 4,000 or higher. And even with that in place, it still generally drops down to 360. So that's important to keep in mind, because when people want to share snippets of Bobby's video, but it's within a recording, even the recording we're making tonight, it's still going to be a lower resolution than the actual raw video. So just want to say that.
And the reason I think that's so important is when this gets debated down the line, people will, take snippets of Bobby's video and it will be just the recording. So we wanted to stress that. We're Mission Ivorybill. We're a year-round grassroots organization. Our real mission is to look for the Ivorybill throughout its habitat. And our idea is, frankly, it's probably easier to find people who know where Ivorybills are rather than it is to train birders to have the outdoor skills to get into the where the Ivorybills are. And as part of that, we have the Louisiana wilds, hunter orange and hunter green, for a purpose. We reach out to hunters because we think they're probably the most important group to the survival of the Ivorybill, certainly here in Louisiana. But we're here tonight just for Mission Ivorybill. We'd love to hear from you. We're not going to take too much time to go through that, but email us or look us up on Facebook. One of the things that really motivates me is this was serendipitously found Roger Tory Peterson's grave in the Falconer Pine Hill Cemetery. Anyway, I just thought I was blown away to see this is the back of his tombstone. Birds cannot speak for themselves. I must speak for them. And I've got to say, I've been involved with the Ivory-billed woodpecker for over 50 years, and I don't think the Ivory-bill's getting a fair shake. So that's another part of our mission. And another thing is we're very public. And this is something that was written as the foreword to Birds of Louisiana in 1931 about the birds belonging to all the people. So there are lots of, this is where we think we fit into the Ivorybill world, is really lots of communication with the locals. So, and I was very lucky. This is my mentor, George Lowry, who was at LSU. George Lowry is very important in our story. Many of you probably know, but it's worth just very briefly because we're so lucky to have Bobby and Tim with us. So the Arkansas, we'll just call it the Arkansas Ivorybill experience 2004 and 2005. 𝗕𝗓𝗄 was a kayaker who reported, I believe on a kayaking forum, they thought he'd seen an Ivorybill. And Mary Scott, I think, got Tim Gallagher's attention. So Tim and Bobby, who were already friends, they went down and, for lack of a better term, verified the sighting. So it was really Bobby and Tim, whose credibility wouldn't be questioned, that got Cornell involved. And it's just funny how these things come about. So just my mentor, George Lowry, when he was 20, he presented this paper at the American Ornithologists Union meeting in Chicago, where he alerted the ornithological world to the Singer-tracked Ivorybills, which in turn led to the Cornell 1935 expedition, which where we have most of the great movie we have and sounds. So it's just amazing how history repeats. And I did want to say one quick thing. One of the misleading things about people who don't know much about Ivorybills is they think that Ivorybills would be easy to locate. And it's true that Audubon wrote that in the 19th century, but by the 20th century, Ivorybills were hard to find. And this is George Lowry talking about how he spent a whole week in the Ivorybill woods and they didn't see an Ivorybill. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I think it's important to know. And while we have Tim Gallagher here, I just thought he encapsulated what I think to be, I'll just say it, I think the Ivory-billed woodpecker problem is mostly a people problem. And so Tim writes in his fantastic The Grail Bird, science has never yet done right by the Ivory-billed woodpecker. And he goes on to discuss how even respected ornithologists such as George Lowry and John Dennis were laughed at for believing that the bird still existed. So I mentioned George Lowry, but John Dennis is very important in our story. John Dennis found the last known Ivory-bill nest, or reported Ivory-bill nest, in Cuba in 1948. So John Dennis should have been considered an expert, as George Lowry, but they both faced ridicule. And we're thrilled to have Bobby Harrison and Tim Gallagher, intrepid explorers. And I wanted to show this in case David Luneau came up. But anyhow, we're just thrilled to have y'all here tonight. And Bobby, I think we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right. Let me share it here. Well, first of all, thank you for letting me present this tonight, and thank you for the comments you made on the resolution. As mentioned, you mentioned earlier, I presented this to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They uploaded it the same day. I did not look at the upload they did for a couple of days, and I was going through it, and I noticed in the real-time video, you cannot even see the bird flying past. It wasn't even in the video. And that compression where they reduced the size of the file really just made that video unviewable. Of course, I contacted them, and they have gotten the actual MP4 files now, and they are making sure that those MP4 files do get to the right people who will make the final decisions on this. So I'm very happy that they're working diligently to do that. They are having some issues uploading onto their public records site. So hopefully they'll eventually get those on there as well. So this video is from a sighting that I had in October 2020. It was actually on October 17th. And let's see if there we go. It was on October 17th, 2020. And this is an analysis of that video. I want to thank Tim Gallagher and Jim Tate for their help in putting this program together. They gave me excellent advice and some direction, and I really appreciate that help. Just to give you a background, it was in October of 2020 when I got the video. It was 4:15 p.m. I was canoeing through a southern swamp. I have not disclosed that location and do not plan on doing so. I was using a camcorder, and by the way, I'm not reading this. It's there for you to read. I'm going to kind of tell you the story. I was floating down the channel, and I was using my camcorder just practicing on wood ducks and pied-billed grebes that were in the water. And this pied-billed grebe had dove down into the water. I was trying to get my camera on it to see if I could react fast enough, which I did not. The bird got underwater before I got the camera on it. And I just settled the camera back against my body. And by the way, I keep this camera running all of the time. It's a Sony Mini DVD is the camera I had at the time. And as soon as I settled the camera against my body, the bird flew in front of me. And, I knew immediately that it was an ivory-billed woodpecker from its flight and the pattern that I saw. I did not actually hold the camera up and look through it or look at the viewfinder. I kept the eyes on the bird as it flew by. It flew in front of me, made a sharp turn to the right, flew down the channel and up over the trees. And in my left hand, I was holding the camera, and I was just following the bird with my hand, kind of an eye-hand coordination, and feel very fortunate that I was able to keep the bird in the frame as much as I did. As the bird flew away, I could see the white trailing edges of the wings separated by the black back. Basically, as far as it flew away, the identification feature was very visible. And of course, James Tanner talks about the white being on the trailing edges and the back being separating those white trailing edges. There was no doubt that the bird that I saw was an ivory-billed woodpecker. The video lasts 9.8 seconds, so that is the longest sighting I've ever had of an ivory-billed woodpecker. And in ivory-bill terms, that's kind of an eternity, really. I thought I would go over the ivory-billed woodpecker features of the bird because it's very important as we look at the video. The ivory bill from a dorsal view has a black leading edge and white trailing edge on its wings. The ventral view, we see both white trailing and white leading edges. We see black wingtips on the ivory bill. The ivory bill has a white line or stripe that goes down the length of the neck. Males have a red crest, females have a black crest, and that's very important in this video. I'm going to show you the first flybys here. And by the way, let me explain that this is divided in what I call a first flyby and a second flyby, because the bird actually flies out of the frame. My camera, I turned my camera trying to follow the bird as it flies by, and I know I'm not keeping up with it, so I re-steady the camera, and the bird flies back into the frame, so I call that the second flyby. So the first flyby, the bird is going to fly across in front of me, and then the second flyby, it's going to fly down the channel of water and then up over the canopy. As you look at this image, and can you see my cursor on the screen? Can you see that, Matt?
I see it.
Got it. Yep.
Okay. Here in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a triangle. The bird is going to enter around that area. It's going to fly across the screen, exit where it says bird exits here. For this slow motion, I have cut out where I have moved the camera around, and you will find the bird come back in on the shallow line where it says bird enters here. It flies across the screen, makes a turn, and then it goes up over the canopy. Of course, the background of this image is going to change because it's a video, moving image. I will click this button. If you'll look up in that right-hand corner, you'll see in slow motion here, coming through the trees, there, bird, you'll see a black body there. There are a couple of really important frames there. The bird is now going to re-enter the frame approximately right here. There we go. I'm kind of following it there with my cursor. See if I can stay just under it. There we go. This second flyby that we're looking at, the bird is very small, but there's some really important information in this. And actually, as the bird does fly by in this, you can, especially in the real time, you can see the white secondaries, and they're separated by a black back. Very important information in that. Let me play it again for you, slow motion. You know where it comes through. You can see the black body in that. You can see the white underwing there. It comes back into the frame. By the way, this is 1/6 speed as it flies away here. You know, I'm watching the bird with my eyes the entire time. My view would have really been obscured if I tried to look through the screen, the viewfinder or the screen. And Matt, should I show that one more time, or you think we're good to go?
Bobby, I showed it one more time because the first time it came across, I made an exclamation.
Okay.
Wow.
Very good.
So real important frames here. Once the bird saw me, it turned to the right very sharply, flew down basically in front of me and up and over the canopy. It was getting away from me. I was a real surprise to that bird, and you can only imagine the surprise to me. Up and over the canopy. So we'll move on to look at this second flyby, because there's some really important frames in here, even though that bird is very small. And here at the red arrow, believe it or not, that little dot right there, the white and black, that's the Ivorybill, or I should say the bird in my video. I am not presenting this as proof of the Ivorybill's existence. I am presenting this as evidence that it does exist. I'm hoping that the Fish and Wildlife will see this as evidence and will take this bird off the proposed list for extinction. So I'm going to move along here, and we're going to come to this point right there. And let's look at a couple of things before we blow this up. There's some artifacts here that we want to notice. These are artifacts. They're simply, in my definition of an artifact for this video, these are highlights and shadows or dark areas next to where the bird is going to be. In the past, there have been people who tried to attach artifacts like this to the bird to change the pattern, wing pattern of the bird. So you need to know where the artifacts are and where the bird is going to be and how these artifacts interfere or intersect with the bird itself. So interact with that. So let's bring our bird there. You can see the bird come in. You see where those artifacts are. And I've lost my ability to move. There we go. Go back. So you can see where the artifacts are. What's bird and what is artifact? There's our bird. Let's blow it up. We're looking at something very important here. We see a dark body to the bird. We see black wingtips. And we have I hit the wrong button. We are looking at the underside of a right wing and a dorsal view of a left wing. We don't know where the right wing ends or the left wing begins, but we know that where the right wing ends, we see it begins here. So we know we have a white leading edge. And as we go across, we know we've got a white trailing because we see no end of that wing. But over on this side, we're looking at a left wing, and we know that it has a white trailing edge. So in the upward stroke, we're looking at a bird that has a black tip on the wing. It has a complete white wing that we see underneath, very blurry, so we're not seeing a black line. And we know that on this side, we're seeing a left wing, so we have to be looking at a trailing edge. But let's move on to another frame here. What we're establishing with this is the bird does have a black body. The bird does have black wingtips. Let's look at this one. And let's look at artifacts again. We have, let me move it forward one more time. We have a light area here. We have some dark areas here. Dark area, these are in the background. So these are artifacts. If I move the bird forward, we'll see that those artifacts, we have an artifact right up against our bird wing here. Let's look at that again. There's our bird there circled. Let's blow it up. Here's that artifact I mentioned. It's over here. But here and here we have two distinct black wingtips. Again, we have an upstroke on the wings. So this is the end of the wingtips. So our right wing has to be ending somewhere in here. But we have a dorsal view of a left wing, so we see that it has a white trailing edge as well. So we have a white leading to a trailing and a white trailing on the upper view of that left wing. We have a black body on the bird here. So we have black body, we have black wingtips. We can establish that with this part of the video. So let's move the bird on through there. Let's look at the first flyby now, frame by frame. And as we go across, the bird is going to enter. In fact, I believe that's right there. Yes. We can see we have a black body there. Black body again. We got some wings coming in here. So it looks like we got a bit of a wing up there. This is just to establish we have a black body there. Wings are, of course, moving up and down. Here's a really important frame right here. Notice we have an artifact there. Yeah. This is an artifact. That's not part of the wing of the bird there. Our bird is here. That's artifact there. We'll continue on. We have another bird in front of the tree here. And we're going to talk about this frame extensively. Another frame there. Notice the wing shape as we go through here. Let's look at it at 400%. Now we're going to pick up the bird here. Let's going to look at this frame right here. Very important frame again. There's that artifact. We'll come back to this. There's our bird again. I've heard people say the bird has a white body. This is a wing that is, and this wing, because of the angle of the bird and the angle I am to the bird, looking up at it, this is the wing simply covering the body there. We know this bird has a black body. We've seen it through this sequence and the second flyby sequence. Again, this is an important wing. Again, the wing here is very important. So we're back now at this frame artifact there. Our bird is here. And you'll notice that this wing is a bowed wing. That's quite interesting. It was very interesting to a number of people that I have showed this to. And by the way, a number of people had seen this video prior to me ever mentioning it. I had never intended to show this video. I was hoping to get something better, and then Fish and Wildlife comes along and to delist the bird to extinction, and they're asking for evidence that it exists. I have some evidence. Therefore, I've released it. If it were not for that, I would have never released this video. If we look at the imperial woodpecker, and this is from a film by a William Ryan. He was a dentist, I believe, from Chicago. Went to Mexico.
Bobby, I'm going to interrupt just so we can talk about the imperial. Just say the relationship of the imperial to the ivory-billed.
The imperial woodpecker is perhaps the closest relative to the ivory-billed woodpecker in our southern swamps. There's of course, the Cuban ivory-bill as well. The very close relatives to each other. And the imperial is a little larger than the ivory-billed woodpecker, but it is still an ivory-bill. Their calls are very much the same.
And just so we're clear, they're the same genus.
Absolutely.
Right, but they're the closest members of that genus, to each other. Yeah.
Absolutely. This bowed wing that we see in the imperial, we also see it in the bird in my video. This bird has that bowed wing and consistently has it. And the imperial, if you were to see this film, it consistently has a bowed wing as well. Compare that to a pileated. With a pileated woodpecker, the wing comes off the shoulder and extends fairly straight down. It does not have that bowed wing in its sustained flight like the imperial has, or like the bird in my video has. And let's look at the image here from the Singer track of an ivory-bill leaving a nest hole. It's a blurry piece of film here, not as blurry as the one in my video. But again, even in the slight blur that we have here, you can see that black line is very hard, well, not hard to see, but it's very narrow. And the blurrier that wing gets, that black line is simply going to disappear. This is an interesting image here. This is a pileated, which I photographed or videotaped in 2005. The orange line, by the way, is direction the body is flying. And in this video, this bird, pileated woodpecker, shot with the same camera as the bird in the video that we're looking at tonight, has a wing in a very similar shape. You'll notice that the wing proportion is very different between these two birds. This is a narrower wing, which you would find on a bird that flies very fast and long distance. But it's taken with the same camera, and of course you can see that there is a black trailing edge on that pileated, and that black trailing edge is missing in the bird in my video. It's a white trailing edge. This bird, by the way, is not even in the first downstroke. It just came off of a stump, and that is a stroke leading to this first downstroke. And you can see the black trailing edges when they're almost edge on there. Again, here you can still see those black trailing edges. They're getting smaller and smaller, but we're still seeing them. Also notice that in the bird on the right here in my video, this is about the extent of the downstroke, and we can see that as the bird flies across in slow motion in my video. And this is about as close as the wings get. Here, the pileated, the wings get very close together. In some cases that I have actually seen them touch. So let's look now as we continue on with that video. Here's our next frame. This to me is a very, very important frame. In fact, when I got this video and I looked at it in the swamp, my first thought is just another Bigfoot video. I got home and looked at it on a small screen and didn't pay much attention to, or didn't notice some of the detail. Of course, it was about 1 a.m. The next morning I got up, went through the video again. And when I came to this frame, I thought, wow, this is pretty amazing. As I look at where the artifacts are and where the bird is, I have a light colored bill. It looks like a crest on that bird, a long neck, long tail here, runs from here to about there. We got a upstroke. I don't know if the bird is actually moving the wings up or down here, but we've got some detail in this wing here. And we're going to blow this up and look at it now. I've lightened the contrast on it just a little, or increased the contrast, and it increased the contrast in the background as well. And as we look at this, it looks like we have the bill starts about right here on this bird, and I established that simply by looking at the artifacts in the background, looking at where the bird is going to go, what is artifact, what is not. It should give you an idea there. Blow that up. We have a wing here. The bird body is turned or tilted slightly toward me, which is typical of this bird as it flies through the swamp. It turns its body up and down, going through narrow passages. It just came through a group of trees. And by the way, that first flight across was only, I think, 0.91 seconds. We have the tip of the bill to the tip of the tail there. We're looking over the top of the left wing to the dorsal view. This is a ventral view of the left, looking over that wing to the dorsal view of the right wing. The bird's body is hid behind that wing. Of course, your question may be, and it was my question, why is there a white tip there? That should be a black tip bird. Well, those wings are black tip. We kind of get a hint of the black tip in the ventral view here of this wing. And that simply has to do with camera mode, shutter speed of the camera and motion of the bird. Let's compare that to the imperial. The imperial has a black tip wing, but we do not see it in the Rhine video. We do see it in some frames. We do not see it in others. And we know that the imperial has a black tip. We've already established that the bird in my video has black tips. We saw those in that second flyby very easily there. What is occurring is it's simply motion blur. It's just blurring the wing and its background together. And in the imperial, you're getting the sky and you're getting the light areas behind the bird in my video. And we've already established this bird has a black body. Again, as I mentioned, this is simply the wing at the angle we're looking at hiding that body. But let's look at the bill, the head, the neck, body behind that wing, and the tail. If you put those all together, you draw a line from that bill to the tail, you've got a very streamlined bird. This is really important again as we look at the video, look at the Ivorybill and the fact that it is a very fast flying bird, which we know the Ivorybill to be. And it's very aerodynamic. It's made for traveling long distances. And we'll go over that after we finish these next few frames. There's our bird in front of the tree again. We'll move to the next frame. Again, we see that bowed wing. Again, we see that bowed wing. As we continue on, that bowed wing is consistent. Well, what does Tanner have to say about the flight and speed of an ivorybill? I did have one critic say to me that the bird in this video flies too fast for an ivorybill, or excuse me, for a woodpecker. Well, one thing that we do find in literature is that this bird flies fast, and it does fly long distances. Tanner wrote, usually the flight resembles that of a pintail, straight with rapid wing beats, a resemblance accentuated by the slender neck and bill. And we can see this bird does have a slender neck. It's a long, slender neck. And it's got a slender tail as well, from here to about there. You can tell, if you looked at the artifacts when I went through that, you'll see that the tail ends about at this point here. He says the important field marks are the characters that the white is on the wing, that the white on the wing is on the rear half. And of course, we see that on both of these wings on this bird. So the ivorybill is well adapted to traveling for long distance. It is a strong flyer with a fast flight for a woodpecker. Some of the critics should keep that in mind. And individuals have been observed feeding over several square miles. So it's traveling long distances within its daily routine. Tanner goes on to say, I've tried to follow the John Bayou's pair in winter, but they traveled so fast that I was unable to keep up with them after they had left the roost. And at the rate they traveled, they seemed intent on going some distance. Robert Ridgway wrote, although a far more powerful bird, the ivorybill looks no larger at a distance than a pileated woodpecker, but its color, its actions, particularly its manner of flight, and its notes are totally different, that once seen, it need never be mistaken for the species or vice versa. So let's look at the flight and speed of this bird that is in the video. We're going to look at the stats on the first flyby first. I am represented by the yellow arrow here. That would be me in my canoe. A to B is approximately 40 feet. And this is the distance of the first flyby. And the bird crosses that in 0.91 seconds, excuse me, which gives it a speed of approximately 30 miles per hour. It has a wing beat frequency of 8.94 beats per second. The total distance from A to D is 500 feet. Point C is approximately where the bird came into view in the second flyby of the video. So the total distance that the bird flew in the 9.8 seconds is 500 feet, which gives it a speed of 35 miles per hour. So after seeing me as it flew across A to B, it turned sharply to the right and made a straight line down the channel, turned and went up over the canopy. And no doubt this bird was escaping me. So there's two types of flights we see in this video. We see a sustained flight there from A to B, and we see an escape flight after seeing me from B to D. And this bird is moving, increases its speed to basically escape from me. Let's look at the flights, the flight speed in relation to other birds. We see that in that first video from A to D, it was flying at 35 miles per hour. So it increased from 30 to 35 as it escaped from me. Compared to a pileated, which flies at approximately 21 miles per hour, and the source is there at the bottom where I got that information, it's flying at approximately 21 miles per hour. A pintail flies at approximately 48 miles per hour, and a wood duck at approximately 31 miles per hour, and a hooded McGann at 50 miles per hour. Historically, the literature will tell you that the bird is described as flying like a pintail or a wood duck. if we look at the shape of the bird, I can see why it is, its flight is related to a pintail. Pintail flies with a very straight line flight. Also, the shape of the bird is very similar. Pintail, something like a flying cross. Straight line flight, very rapid, very fast flight. And the wood duck, I can see why they would relate it to that because of the speed that the birds are traveling. A wood duck, 31 miles per hour. This bird flying at 30 in sustained flight from A to B, 35 in that escape flight. So I can see why those two ducks would be described as similar to that of the Ivorybill.
Bobby, may I make a comment?
Yes.
I just wanted to introduce the term aspect ratio. It's an ornithological term that describes the relationship between the length of a wing and the front to back width of a wing. And the birds you're describing, the pintail, the hooded merganser, and other cross-shaped birds all have a aspect ratio exceedingly like that of the ivory-billed woodpecker. Others, like the pileated, have a different aspect ratio where the width is greater in proportion to the length. That's all. I wanted to say that.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. Let's look at the wing beat frequency comparison of the bird in my video to some known Ivorybills. As you saw in the other slide that I had put down, this bird has a wing beat frequency of 8.94 beats per second. If we look at a sound recording of an Ivorybill leaving a nest hole in the Singer track in 1935, from that sonogram, you calculate the wing beat frequency, and Cornell did this back in, I believe it was 2005. They came up with 8.4 beats per second. That's the bird leaving the nest. The bird in my video is in sustained flight with 8.94 beats per second. If you look at the William Ryan video that was shot in Mexico of the imperial woodpecker, it shows a sustained flight of 8.0 beats per second. It is a larger bird and perhaps would be expected to have a slightly lower wing beat frequency. And at 8.0, that would be slightly slower than what we have in my video and in the sonogram from Cornell in 35. The Leno video, which by the way is an ivory-billed woodpecker, has a 8.6 beats per second. A pileated woodpecker has a wing beat frequency of 2.5 to 5 beats per second, and I have the reference for that there below. A pileated woodpecker can reach 7.5 beats per second, but it is not sustainable after the first few flaps. The flap rate drops rapidly down to the 5 to 2.5 beats per second at that point. A wood duck, by the way, has a sustained flight wing beat of 7.5 beats per second. So why is this bird not a pileated or a wood duck or a hooded or pintail or even a Muscovy? Well, as we look at the pileated, we already saw the wing ratio in that comparison of a pileated that I videotaped in 2004 with the bird in our video today. You can see that neither that in that upstroke nor downstroke of the pileated do these wing patterns match at all. If we look at the wood duck, the hooded merganser, and the pintail, these ducks all have light color bodies. The bird in our video has a black body. We've seen that through many frames throughout the video. I know that this has been brought up as being possibly a white body. It is not the white body. We've seen that the bird has a black body, and this is the wing obscuring that body. I had, let's look at the wingtips. None of these birds have black wingtips. We've already established the bird in this video does have black wingtips. I've had one critic say perhaps it is a wild Muscovy. The wild Muscovy has black trailing edges. It also has this very fleshy cere that comes all the way up above the eyes. And you can see, though while this is not a really detailed image of the head, you can see that there is no fleshy cere there. This is especially not a red cere. We have a black head there, by the way, which is very important. Why is this bird not a black-bellied whistling duck? You can see again that the wing patterns simply don't match. The underside is dark, but the under wings and the trailing edges of the black-bellied whistling duck are black, and that simply is not the case in our bird in the video. The red-head, common merganser, canvasback, red-breasted merganser all have light bodies. Our bird has a black body, as we've already established. If we look at wingtips, two of those ducks, the common merganser male, the red-breasted, do have black on their wingtips, but they extend all the way down halfway through the wing. It simply doesn't match the bird at all in our video. As we see in that second flyby, we've got those black wingtips, and they are on the tip of the wing there. Let's look at the American black duck. It does have a dark body, but the wing pattern does not work, nor, as you look at the head of any of the ducks we've looked at, the bird in my video simply does not have a head shaped as a duck. And we're lacking the black wingtips on the American black duck. So, what are features that suggest the bird in the video is an ivory-billed woodpecker? Looking at the inset circled in red there on the right, and compare that to our pileated woodpecker, as I mentioned earlier, we're about the extent of the downward stroke on the wing beat there. And let's see, here we go. We're about the extent of the downward stroke there in our bird in the video, and that pileated, it has a much deeper wing stroke. We have the bowed wing in the bird in the video, which is consistent as the bird flies across. And on the pileated woodpecker, we're seeing a bird, the wing comes off the shoulder, extends straight down. There's no bowed wing to that at all. But it is consistent with the imperial woodpecker from the William Rhine film shot in 1956, the closest relative to an ivory-billed woodpecker. What are other features that suggest that the bird in the video is an ivory-bill? As we look at the dorsal view of this right wing in this frame, we see a hint of a leading black edge. I know this is a very blurry wing. Both of them are very blurry. The bird is moving fast. It's moving forward at this point at 30 miles per hour, and it has a wing beat frequency of 8.9 beats per second. A video camera shooting 30 frames per second has a shutter speed slower than a 30th of a second to capture this. So you know that the wings are going to be blurry. If we look at the trailing edge here, the dorsal view, we do have what is considered a white trailing edge there. If we look at the dorsal, the ventral view of the left wing, we have what appears to be the white leading edge there, the white trailing edge there. We have what appears to be perhaps a black wingtip there, and a blurry black line separating the white leading and the white trailing edge. We have a light to white bill on this bird, very light color or a white bill there. We have a black head. We have a long neck with what appears to be a white line going down that neck right there. We have a long tail. You put the line through that bill to the tip of the tail, you have a very straight line, aerodynamic bird made for traveling fast and long distance. Again, black body, a bowed wing. You have that extensive white in the underwing. And we have black wingtips. Don't want to forget those. Now it's time to see the flyby in real time. You saw this slide earlier. You now know where the bird is going to enter and fly. You will see the camera move to the left as I try to follow the bird. And I know I'm not doing a good job of it. As I move that camera, I quickly reorient the camera and put it, stabilize it, and the bird flies back into the camera where it says bird enters here, it flies across, up over the top. If you blink, you will miss this bird. And as I mentioned, on the upload, especially with the Microsoft Teams movie compression, there are only 2 frames visible in that video. You do not even see the bird. The Zoom does a better job of the compression. It worked much better with the Birdwatching Magazine program that they did. You could at least see the bird fly over, but it's very choppy. So I'm going to count to 3, push the button. The bird is going to fly across. Please don't blink. And let's do 1, 2, 3, push. Now imagine you didn't have your video camera in the right position. Could you have gotten your video on that bird? Do you think that's even possible? Let's do it again. And as it flies away, you can notice, you see the black body and the black back there separating the white trailing edges of the wings. I'll do that again for you. Nothing flies like this in the song. I'll do it one more time, then I'll show you the slow motion. That is the real-time video. And we'll go back and play it for you slow-mo one more time. This is what you just saw. This is the evidence that I have. You can accept it or not. I hope those who make the decision on whether to delist this bird will accept it as evidence and sufficient evidence to at least consider taking the bird off of that list and giving us some more time. I'd like to see it come off that list for at least 10 years before they attempt to delist again. And I'm going to unshare my screen. And am I hearing? I don't hear you, Matt.
My wife muted me because I was making too many, I was laughing, and because it was so great. The first time I saw it fly across, in real time, I got tears in my eyes. So, and I don't hate to do this. One of the great things is the gathering people. And so Roshan, who's 12 and now maybe 13, Roshan entered a little late. Bobby, I'm not going to ask you to do the whole program again, but because literally I think this is such an historic moment. We really want the 12 or 13-year-old. Roshan, do you mind unmuting yourself? And
Yeah,
how old are you?
Yeah, I'm still 12, but.
Yeah, good. Well, I mean, this was, Bobby, if you don't mind, Roshan, was there anything in particular you wanted to see before?
Can I get that flyby again? And then I also wanted to ask whether we'd be able to analyze the video ourselves after.
Fish and Wildlife is supposed to put the MP4 files up, and you'll be able to download them and do that.
Do you know where they're going to be?
They'll be on the public record, and yes, I can get that information to Matt. Matt probably already has that contact.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll email you afterward, Matt.
Yeah,
Great.
and but when they're putting them up, I don't know. I think they're having some technical difficulties. I could not upload them on the comment because the files were too big,
Right.
and they are trying to work that out now.
Gotcha. Hey, Bobby, before we get off your screen, I told you the only, a lot of people contacted me beforehand. The only one that was, the only good criticism I thought was that they thought the bird had a white belly at some point. Can you talk about that a little? Why
Well, that
might
was
appear?
framed with the bird in front of the tree, and this bird is, the body of the bird is turned at an angle. I'm looking up at it with a video camera pointing upward toward it, and it's that wing is simply in the way of the body. There is all it is. You can see that in other frames that bird has a black body. It has black wingtips. There's a lot of discussion. What kind of camera should you use? Of course, I'm looking at a 4K right now. I'm currently using a D500, excuse me, which does 5K. Nikon D500 that does 4K. But the issue is frame rate. And most of these cameras are shooting at either 24 or 30 frames per second, which means that the shutter speed is, I previously said there was a slower shutter speed. It's a faster shutter speed than a 30th of a second, but they can vary. They can be right a bit faster than a 30th, or they can be much faster, depends on the lighting condition. The issue is at 30 frames per second in poor lighting conditions, or where there's not enough light, you're going to get blur no matter what camera you have, unless you're able to shoot at such a high ISO that you can set to shorten that shutter speed, make it shutter speed shorter. And getting these wing beaks stopped will take a faster frame rate than most cameras will do. I'm actually looking at a camera that'll do 120 frames per second.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah, go.
I had a camera idea. This one, it doesn't solve the frame rate problem, but it has really great image stabilization, and I use it for pileatids. I live in Maryland. There are no Ivorybills here. It's the Sony 4K camcorder.
Which one is it?
It's the Handycam 4K.
Is it the AX or XA53?
It's the Vario Sonar T.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one. I'm looking at
But the lens itself, if you can see in the front, it actually moves to follow a bird.
Mhm.
So it's really good for like flying birds. It does not solve the frame rate problem. It records at 30 frames a second still, but
Yeah, I think the one I'm looking at will do the same thing, but it has 120 frames.
yeah.
The only problem is like just under $2,000.
Yeah, that's an issue. Bobby, we'll get to more questions later unless there's anything you want to do, because I wanted to turn it over to Tim if he wanted to.
Yeah, let's go to Tim.
Yeah, I don't have much to say, but I did want to point out what an interesting video this is that Bobby shot, and what makes it unique compared to what a lot of the evidence we've been looking at lately have been taken with remote cameras and just shots of birds going by, and even the Leno video, they had their camcorder running and really didn't get a good look at the bird, didn't identify it immediately, but thought it was interesting, especially when David played the movie back. And then we all analyzed it together and, became convinced, and I still am, that it was an Ivory-billed woodpecker. But in Bobby's case here, he saw this bird, he saw all the field marks and positively identified it, before he even picked the camcorder up. So this is a bird he identified. He's not identifying it after the fact by looking at this video. And Bobby is a good birder. I've known him for 30 some years. We've gone on many trips together, bird photography trips, birding trips, in addition to all the Ivory-billed woodpecker searches we've been on. And he's good at identifying birds, and he's an excellent photographer, believe it or not. I mean, look at the bird video. But so I have a lot of faith in his powers of observation. And, you know, and I have to say, I was with Bobby the first sighting he had of an Ivorybill, and the only sighting I ever had of one. And we'd been going out to the swamps a lot together. This is in 2004, February. And we had just an unmistakable Ivorybill fly passes. I mean, it didn't fly anything like a pileated. It was swift. It was an elongated body. And it just, we saw all the field marks, and it was swooping up to land on this Tupelo, only, you know, 65, 70 feet away from us. I mean, we literally yelled Ivorybill and scared it, you know, going to the woods. And it got on these other Tupelos, and it would hitch around the other side, fly about 50 feet, hitch around. And we were getting killer looks at it. And, you know, we abandoned our canoe. We're climbing over logs, ripping our clothes, and almost dying of cardiac arrest. Trying, you know, with camera and a camcorder, and, you know, hopeless. But so what Bobby got here is so much better. And I also have to say about Bobby, he has spent more time in the swamp than anyone I know. You know, after we had that sighting, he more or less moved, you know, lived for months in a little motel near 𝐵𝑖𝑟𝑑 and went out there constantly. And so it doesn't surprise me that he's had several sightings over the years, and he's gone to many other places. Together we went to many places, all over Louisiana and Arkansas and Mississippi, you know, Florida. So, he's very believable. And I have to say, before I saw that Ivorybill, I didn't know whether they were still alive. I really hoped they did. I wanted to follow up on all these sightings people had, especially hunters who were out there and had nothing to gain by saying they'd seen an Ivorybill, which had these wonderful descriptions. And we went to many places, but, you know, what are the odds we'd see one, even if one or two existed? But we had this just really killer sighting. It was such a strong sighting. I mean, Bobby fell back on a log and was just crying. I saw an Ivorybill, you know.
Thank you, Tim.
Right. and I was just in shock.
So, just one piece of recommendation. My name is Ed Odenkirch, and I'm a retired senior science advisor for Environmental Protection Agency. But Bobby, one of the things that you were dealing with was frame rate on the cameras that you're using.
Yeah.
You know, I use an OMD, Olympus OMD, and for video, and it's an image stabilized sensor. And the OMD and the OME can push all the way up to almost 290 frames per second. So you might want to be thinking about looking at still cameras with those rapid sensors.
I want you to give me that again. Just hang on. I want something to write on here.
Well, you should be able to play back the recording.
Yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
But he's right here, and he can say it again. Well,
it would be an OMD, either an OMD, and I think an OMD gets you all the way up about 120 frames per second in good light. But if you go to the OME system, which is the professional system, and it won't be cheap, but it will give you, I've seen frame rates recorded up all the way up to almost 290 frames per second.
And it'll run like that all day?
It will not run like that all day because you will not have card space to run it like that all day.
Well, I mean, you can just keep adding cards. I mean, it'll run.
Yeah. You keep adding cards. You can keep, and you'll have to keep pumping batteries in.
Yeah, it's not running it for 5 minutes, and then you have to put a new card in. So.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you because I don't know what the major size, the final size acceptance of the cards are at this point in time. But
I'm going to check into
that.
you.
Yeah.
Hey, Ed, thanks so much for that. How's the low light performance with that model?
Does really well. I mean, I'm a still photographer primarily, so I shoot all my nature shots with an OMD. So when you hear criticism from still photographers, we're going to talk about bokeh and all kinds of crap. It's not going to matter to anybody who's trying to do the cinema. But it does pretty well, and it's also limited by what lens you put on it, of course.
Actually, while the hood's up on that, Tim, did you want to say anything else? Because then we'll let's talk about cameras for a bit, and then we'll go to Jim Tate.
That's fine. Yeah. No.
So this might be worth a quick discussion. Bobby or Tim or anybody, give us the pros and cons. Have you thought about a still camera, or so? What are the pros and cons of using a still camera?
Oh, I currently use a Nikon D800. I'm going to be ordering a Z9 soon. And of course, I haven't looked at all the video capabilities of the Z9. You know, I'm a still photographer, photographing birds, and I'm going to the Z9 for that purpose. But I know it has a very high-end video camera as well. I'm looking at something. One of the things I like about some say like a Sony is the autofocus. It's you know, I can get a long life battery that'll last all day.
Gotcha.
I mean, it'll last approximately 10 hours, and that's one of the things I like about it. And I'm constantly looking at video cameras, trying to figure out what would be the best thing. Then I was looking at these other Sonys simply because of you can get up to 120 frames a second. And the more frames per second you can get, the more chances you get of getting more detail. One of the well, it's really not a downfall of the camera. It's got a 13 power optical zoom, one of them that I'm looking at. The other is a 20 power. But the sensor on the 13 optical zoom is a million more pixels.
Wow.
Than on the 20 optical zoom. So that would give me much more detail that I could blow up.
Yeah, good. Hey, I don't want to, because so many people are here just to see your video, I don't want to get too far afield with camera stuff. Jim Tate, did you want to add something quickly, and then we'll open up to questions?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Bobby, Tim, Jim. If you want to ask a question, unmute yourself. I'll look through some of the chats. John Williams, go ahead.
Yeah, Bobby, I have a quick question. Do you think you would have had a red pixel somewhere if that was a male bird?
You're really broken up, and I'm not hearing.
Hey, Bobby, the question is, if it were a male, would we have seen red pixels?
I do believe so, because we can see enough of that crest. Which I am calling a crest. It looks like a crest laid down to me there. And I absolutely believe we would be seeing red if that was a male bird. I have no doubt that the bird in that video is a female. And as I watched this bird fly by, I was close enough to it that, my goodness, the red would have jumped out at me.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
I have to laugh. Lauren is showing me the chat, and so I could just see the first bar. And Dan Dellum very helpfly said, "Here's the location of Bobby's video." When he said the location of Bobby's video, he was talking about the comment. I thought he had geocached. He had figured out where it was. Anyhow, yeah, it was the presentation that you get. Yeah, thank you very much. So look at the chat. Roshan, if you want to unmute yourself, you had a question.
I don't know. I'd like to see if there's a frame that Bobby considers to be the best view of the underwing.
Is there a frame?
Yes.
I think the one where the bird is in front of the tree
Okay.
is the best view of the one. Well, that's the one I like best. That bowed wing with all the white seems to be a favorite among so many of the people who initially saw this. I like the bird against the tree and that view of the left wing. Tim, what do you have a?
Well, there's about 3 that I really like. So I don't,
Oh yeah, Tim, I wanted to say that I'm a huge fan of your work. You can see I've got your book in the background.
Hey, wait a minute. I'm in one of those books.
The Grail Bird, I don't have the Grail Bird yet. I got it.
Oh, no.
Because I read it from the library and then I randomly bought Imperial Dreams for some reason.
Great.
But
I think Bobby's in Imperial Dreams too, because he came on one of my trips to Mexico.
is he?
Yeah,
I can check.
yeah.
Yeah.
Unless I left him out, you know.
Story of my life.
My 2 cents worth, the most compelling thing to me is just when the bird, the style of the flight when it comes in. That's where I got tears in my eyes the first time I saw it.
Yeah, I can tell you that there's no other bird that flies like this in the swamp.
That's right. That's one thing when we saw that bird, we knew that's something we'd never seen before.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, whoa. It just in the corner of our eye when we first saw it coming up that side slope. And you know, interestingly, I interviewed George Lamb several times, who he and his wife Nancy, when they had shortly after college in the 1950s, they went to Cuba and they found several Ivorybills. And he took some of the last real acceptable pictures of them in Oriente province in Cuba. And we're just talking about how people always think he saw a pileated. And he said, there's no way that you can confuse an Ivorybill with a pileated. And I thought, well, that's strong, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it's a different bird.
there was 11 months that only a few people had seen this video. You know, in September, when Fish and Wildlife decided to put the Ivorybill on the D list, I mean, there was only a handful of people that had seen this video. And I had shown it to some duck experts. I will not mention what organization they were with. And I would show them the video and simply ask them, what duck do you think this is? And they would look at it and say, that's not a duck. And then I would show the slow motion, and most of them would just simply say, I won't even go there. I've shown it to duck hunters. What kind of duck is this? And they immediately will say, that's not a duck. I'll show it slow motion and I have no idea.
And they're the best
But
observers.
it's not a duck.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time I saw it, an Ivorybill, it was below me. It was flying so low and straight that my brain just couldn't compute what that could be. And a lot of the reports we get are birds flying very low and fast. And of course, that's, we think, because they need to bleed off the kinetic energy to be able to land on the tree. But we had a couple questions in the chat.
If I could comment.
Go ahead, Jim. Yeah.
Matt.
Yeah.
I appreciate very much your comment about sort of brain lock when something totally new comes along. I don't know how many people here are familiar with the fact that there is a non-red yellow-bellied sapsucker that has no red whatsoever on its body. It's anywhere. It's a genetic mutant or a genetic change. And the first time I saw one, it came up to a feeding tree. And when looking at it, I just literally had brain lock. Not a hairy, not a downy, not a sapsucker, not a, you know, and
Yeah.
it is what I think happened to you when you saw your first flyby of an Ivorybill. You just your brain just says, this does not compute.
Exactly. As I've said, that where I saw it, there had been studies by the Forest Service in the 70s, and there were lots of metal implements still in the woods, and so my brain just couldn't compute a bird flying that fast, that low, that straight. So I literally thought it was mechanical for the first 0.5 seconds. But Bobby, that's a question. We'll get to more of the Zooms. So were you emotional this time, or was this just an ordinary bird sighting?
I'm always excited. I mean,
He wants to know if you cried. Did you cry?
no, I did not. Not this time. And Paul Jackie
Yeah.
has a
Jason,
question.
yeah.
J-A-C-K-Y?
Yeah, Jason Paul. Yeah.
Okay. He says, do you remember hearing any sounds as it flew by? You know, I use a trolling motor to get around in the swamp. And the reason I use a trolling motor is there's less movement of me in the canoe. And I think this bird is very attuned to that type of movement, people moving around. So with the canoe, I'm not moving. I'm more like a log. This is my idea. There's no basis for this, really. I think I'm more like a log floating down a channel of water. But that trolling motor right beside me, I don't hear much. And that's the disadvantage to having that trolling motor. And I did not hear anything. But as close as that bird was as it came across, without that trolling motor on, I probably would have heard something.
Yeah. But, we would not be getting this close to these birds if we were still using paddles like we used to.
Flashing paddles,
We're
yeah.
not doing this because we're lazy. Partly that, but I mean, you get out there with a trolling motor, and it's this little electric motor on your canoe, and you're just drifting so silently that it used to be wood ducks would be flushing 100 feet, 150 feet up ahead of us. Now we're like almost right up on them when they flush, and we're seeing otters and other things, and that it's amazing how close you can approach stuff, and that's how you want it to be. You want to be right there.
Also, I kind of want to clarify that because I'm sitting by the motor, it's very loud. But if you get 10 feet, 15 feet away from that motor, you barely hear it.
Oh, that's right. That's true. I mean, you're right there. You got your elbow resting on it, and but it's just like this little. Yeah, it's not much at all. You can't get 10 feet away.
Yeah, wildlife don't pay much attention to it. And Tim's right, boy. Wood ducks would flush just hundreds of feet away from you. I mean, hundreds.
Yeah.
And with this trolling motor, I've had them probably within 20 feet before they flushed. And they're like, that's Harrison again. He's messing up my day.
Hey, we've had a slur in the chat of Bobby versus Tim, and it's Tim. Why didn't you cry the first time when you saw it?
Oh, he's from England. That's why
Stiff upper lip,
Stiff upper lip and stoic.
I think I'm just in shock. It's just like
I will tell you
face,
that when we saw that bird the first time, we chased through the swamp. The muck and mud trying to.
We're literally climbing over logs, and I mean, and Bobby, he's just almost in cardiac arrest and leaning against the log. I just saw an Ivorybill.
He's very dramatic. But Tim's eyes. You heard the expression, eyes the size of a silver dollar. Literally, the whites of his eyes were so large it'd make a silver dollar look like a penny.
It's funny when you say that. The first time we heard Ivorybills, I was with the two other guys. One guy was talking, and I heard what I thought was an Ivorybill, but I didn't want to yell Ivorybill and be the idiot, right? And I looked over, and the other guy, his eyes were as big as Dallas, as we would say. So that was the cue. Here's a question, Bobby. How did you know that it was an Ivorybill? And this, Tim, you can answer this too. When you first saw it, had you studied the plumage of the bird?
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We were in a canoe, and we were heading down the bayou. And Tim was in front of me, so I saw that he was.
So I saw it a couple of milliseconds before Bobby. I wanted to point that out.
I could see he was looking at a bird that I was looking at that was coming through the swamp. And neither I nor Tim were willing to yell out what bird that was. No matter if it was a common bird, it was something I've never seen before. And when the bird flew in front of us, it had just come through a narrow spot and it had turned its wings. These birds, when they go through, they fly straight line. Even though with a swamp, instead of flying around trees, they turn on in. And this bird had come through a narrow spot and its left wing was down, right wing was up. We had a full view of its back and we saw that diagnostic pattern and we just both yelled Ivorybill at the same time. I just wanted to make sure he knew what he was looking at.
I had always, just from reading Tanner several times and all that, he always makes such a big point of, it's the trailing edge, white all the way to the trailing edge. And I always thought, if I ever see anything, I'm just going to focus on that. And that's what I did. I locked on that thing. And in my mind, it's like white all the way to the trailing edge and then swinging up to land. And we saw it so well. I mean, slowed down, it touched its feet on that. If we wouldn't have yelled Ivorybill, I think I had a camera around me. We'd have nailed the killer shot that everyone's been looking for.
And we were so close to that bird and I remember this so distinctly, that the white secondaries, they stepped down at an angle into the primaries, and I could see the sheen on the shaft of the primary feathers, separating that sheen on the shaft.
And I was the blackness of the bird and the whiteness of the, it's brilliant. It wasn't like pileated, which is kind of low contrast in a way.
And people who are not artists, I've been in the art world all my life, in photography, sculpture, and such, but the color, an Ivorybill has this blue-black, a deep black, and a pileated has a brown-black.
Yep.
Their black is not a rich black. It's more of a brown black. But the Ivorybill has this deep, rich blue-black. And if you know about colors, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yep. But the color, there is a big color difference between a pileated and a Ivory-billed woodpecker.
That's so great. We had a couple of easy questions. One was, what's the farthest north an Ivorybill has been seen? There's what I think is a disputed record. Roshan and I can talk about that, from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I found a specimen from probably central Indiana. We're still doing some research.
Matt, I don't know if you've watched my video, but I can argue that the normal breeding range of the Ivorybill definitely, or I believe, went up to where I am actually here, up in Maryland.
Yeah.
There's a couple records. Wilson and Audubon have records from Maryland, and Wilson had a record from Philadelphia. So I'm going to say Cape May.
Yeah.
Well, there's a historical record of somebody saying that they shot one in Pennsylvania. I do not believe it was an Ivorybill, because the guy ate the bird and talked about how terrible it tasted. Pileateds are known to taste terrible. Ivorybills are supposedly taste very good.
Yeah. I've had people in Avoyelles Parish, Louisiana, tell me that they've eaten Ivorybill and that they were very good. So if anybody, go ahead. Anybody else want to unmute themselves?
I had one question. How do you could you equip a kayak with one of these trolling motors fairly easily?
Yeah, I've got some friends
I think
gone out that have done that. They just, I just made a raft myself to go on my canoe, and they did the same thing. They just built a wooden brace to go on the kayak and put a trolling motor on it.
You need to have enough room. It depends on the kayak. You need to have enough room to have a car battery, which is what they run off, like a 12-volt.
A marine battery.
Yes, yeah, but yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's like a car battery. Just marine batteries store more power,
right,
over a long use like that.
Hey, Matt, you're muted. I don't know if you want to.
Go ahead, Roshan.
No, I was just saying you're muted.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was looking through the chat. Anyone else want to unmute themselves while we go through the chat?
I mean, in terms of whether how far north an Ivory-bill occurred, I mean, they said that there was some saying that a squirrel could go from, I don't know, from Pennsylvania all the way down to Florida without ever touching the ground before they cut down on the forests.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be surprising that unless they're really tree specific, that they would have occurred quite far, unless they didn't like the cold or some other aspect.
Well, you
And
know,
we do have,
Yeah, I mean, the 𝗕𝗕𝗵𝗆 woodpeckers is really a Latin American species, and these are the, genus, and this is the northernmost representative, so it might have, been hitting the northernmost part.
I think that that the range did kind of coincide with what's this tree? Bald cypress? What am I thinking of?
Yeah, there's a cypress. I mean, that's
Yeah,
not
one of the cypresses. Because up here in Maryland, we have a very large tract of cypress. It's actually the largest continuous tract of cypress in the United States. It's in Maryland and Delaware. And there is so I think the last record for Maryland was 1881. I think. In Princess Anne's, is that right? Something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that bald cypress was a very major tree in the.
Yeah. Tim Herman points out a good point that the abundance of large beetles and other suitable food might have been the limiting factor to the north for the latitude. That's a good. One of the mysteries with the Ivorybill, though, I mean, obviously we have Tanner's description of it, but as far as I know, and somebody can correct me, we only have 3 stomach contents of Ivorybills.
And one of them was like 50% berries, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they were all mostly vegetable.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's a good supposition. Hey Tim, do you mind? I'm not a scientist, so tell me, Tim Herman, you say use a stable isotope analysis might be able to confirm that locality.
Yeah, I can just unmute. Basically, based on the isotopes of whatever it's feeding on are going to get incorporated into the body, and those can be mapped, as far as I know, anywhere around the globe, and you can specifically isolate based on what's in an animal specimen to where it originated from to some degree. It's somewhat coarse, but I think you could probably get across like regional areas of the United States.
Wow, that is fantastic. Tim, would that so the taxidermy, the preparation of the specimen, that wouldn't interfere with that?
No, that shouldn't affect it because you could take a feather or something like that. As far as I understand, I mean, it's not my realm of expertise, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
Thank you so much. That's why I love
identified like some peregrine falcons where they were born, and that kind of thing by looking at their feathers. But I don't know.
You learn something new every day. Pod Haberman asked if males and females of the Ivorybill fly at different speeds. I don't know of anything in the literature which says that. Anybody have any opinions about that?
I've not heard or read anything.
Yeah, I don't. The only way I could see that happening would be some sort of a size difference. But I know that there is a size difference, but it isn't too large.
It certainly wouldn't be noticeable.
Yeah, in the field.
Don Reed asked, how many Ivorybills do you estimate to exist? 413 specimens. I'll just go with that at first. I literally think, I know there was one as of June 24 in Tensas River National Wildlife Refuge. So my answer would be 1 to 1,000. You might sound silly, but 1,000. Here's the problem with the Ivorybill is it lives in a very specialized habitat where there aren't many people, A. B, the people who might see it might not know the significance of it. And those who are hunters are reluctant to report Ivorybill sightings because they're worried about intrusion on hunting rights or landowner rights. And then the other thing is that the outcome reporting bias that Chris Haney talks about. There is such a birding world is so nasty to some of us who say that we've seen Ivorybills. So, in answer to your question, I don't think we have a responsible answer to how many Ivorybills.
Matt, so
Yeah.
my estimate would be somewhere between 20 and 200, I'll say. Because so I broke up the Ivorybills range into 3 areas, one of which they might not even be in there anymore, which would be the one in southern Florida, the Big Cypress.
Uh-huh.
That's one of the areas I chose, and I'm somewhat skeptical about that. But I said the South Carolina interconnected swamps has at least 20, I'll say. They did some surveys down there in 2007 and 2008, and they had quite a few auditory detections. And then the other one is a very large area along the Mississippi alluvial plain and in the area, the Florida Panhandle. And that, I think, is at least 150, or if not more.
This is actually a good point. Roshan, thanks for that so much. So one of the controversies is Tanner's estimate of how much area a pair needed. That's not so well established, I think, because he didn't really assess how much of the Singer tract was suitable habitat. In other words, he used all 88,000 acres of the Singer tract and divided it essentially by 3 to come up with how much room the pair needed. So my belief is we don't have a very good estimate of it, and I think
you can't estimate. You can't really estimate very well. I said literally 20 to 200. So.
No, but what I was saying, Roshan, is the limiting factor, and this is, for instance, Jerome Jackson. I know he's on record as saying whether or not the Ivorybill is extinct, he thinks the species is doomed to extinction because there's simply not enough habitat to support it. I mean, obviously, Jerome Jackson, is a leading scientist, but my quibble is with what area a breeding pair of Ivorybills needs.
I can't. No, even just in Maryland, we have enough habitat to support breeding Ivorybills. We've got the Patuxent Wildlife Research Center, which is quite a few, and then we've got that big stand out on the coastal plain. And then the other thing I wanted to say was that I did an analysis on that Project Principalis paper, that recent thing. I used the Luneau neck aspect ratio model thing. I used it on all of the things that they presented. And one of the videos that they really did highly show failed the test. However, the one that shows the sky pointing didn't. In fact, it did quite well with a 2.27.
Good. And just to clue those in, so Guy Luneau did a good job with the aspect ratio, right? And to which I wrote the foreword. At any rate, so that's very compelling. Oh, there was a quick question about dampening the sound of the trolling motor. Anybody want to comment on?
Actually, back in 04, 05, I guess it was. When I started using a trolling motor, I made a fin to go on the shaft of the trolling motor, and that did dampen it, and it kind of got tore up here recently, and I haven't redone it. It does, and it does. And what it is the gurgling of the water coming around the shaft. So I made a airplane wing, basically, kind of thing, and it did dampen the sound tremendously.
Yeah.
I've got to rebuild it. I just haven't done it.
Good. Hey, Bobby or Tim, I'll start with you, Bobby. Do you have an estimate of Ivorybills?
Well, before I answer that, somebody's asked the question, how close was I to the bird? With the video, I would estimate, I'm moving, the bird's moving. I would estimate that I was 50 to 60 feet away. The camera was zoomed, it wasn't a tight zoom at all on the camera. I'm just guesstimating I was probably 50, 60 feet away. Could have been a little further, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
just from the size of the bird in the frame and the zoom that it was at. Estimate on birds, I don't have an estimate. Not seen enough birds to, I have seen multiple birds together, but certainly couldn't do that. I know, and Tim, if you correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I believe that Marjan estimated that there could possibly be 6 pair in the White River just based on area.
Right. It's hard to say. I feel like we don't have enough data to say
Yeah,
how
we
many
don't.
Ivorybills are.
Yeah, there certainly isn't enough data.
There's a lot of habitat. I mean, people say how terrible the habitat is. It's improved a lot since the 50s, you know.
Actually, habitat's pretty good.
Yeah, and when I think of, you know, the fact that we saw that bird, I felt like this bird's bloodline or whatever, it made it through the bottleneck of the 40s and 50s when there's a lot of clear-cut forests, so the 𝗕𝗏𝗺𝗏 and all these places.
Yeah.
It's much better now. And compared to Cuba, and people are always saying, oh, well, at least they're probably Cuba. That area is minuscule compared to what we have here.
Cuba probably isn't even the same species. They did a DNA analysis, and it's about as distinct as the imperial. So,
Yes.
yeah. Also, the video from Project 𝗕𝗏𝗺𝗵𝗵𝗆𝗆, the one that shows 3 birds, also the sky pointing, I interpret the 3rd bird to be a young from a previous clutch, because that isn't that a known behavior in Ivorybills and imperials, is to have young from previous clutches help to raise another clutch. So that's the only way I can imagine there being 3 birds together.
That time of year, yeah.
And with one pair, at least one that's definitely a pair.
That's good. And there was a question asked about, are Ivorybills limited to swamplands? The short answer is no. There was a theory, was it Housebrook in 1891? He had a theory that Ivorybills you wouldn't find them at an elevation above 100 feet, but that's just been disproven, you know, the further up you go in the United States. But that's a good question. So one of the issues was the Ivorybill limited to virgin bottomland hardwoods? That was never true, but controversially, Lester Short, who was the 20th century woodpecker expert, Lester Short's opinion was that the Ivorybill, the American Ivorybill, like the Cuban Ivorybill and the imperial, was a specialist of the pine forests, and then the burning of the southeastern pine forest for agricultural purposes dumped the Ivorybill into the bottomland hardwoods. But that's a good question. I've looked into the issue of specific tree species, and so it's a little frustrating. So A.T. Wayne was the biggest collector of Ivorybills, so I was curious. So he had to know that be a really good predictor of behavior. So A.T. Wayne wrote in an article on the 𝗕𝗏 that Ivorybills weren't limited so much by tree species as to damage to trees for the beetle implantation, so that they fed off of beetle larvae. So his point was that in looking for Ivorybills, he really looked for damage of the 4 horsemen of fire, flood, drought, or previous insect damage. And I think, you know, if you're devising a strategy to find Ivorybills, I think you do want to look for disturbance of the forest in some way. Can we? So I think that's fairly. I think that's a good strategy.
It's interesting that, you know, so much of what we know about Ivorybills is based on that very small population of them in the Singer Tract, you know.
Right.
And
that's a really good point. And in Tanner's monograph, he says your results may vary, in the sense that he just studied a few birds. And for those of you who don't know, the issue of whether or not Ivorybills are tame or easy to see. Thanks, Roshan. So the Singer Tract, where Tanner observed the Ivorybills, that was a refuge, and the prohibited shooting. So maybe the birds were more attenuated to humans. So
they're always right by their nest. I mean, that's what people aren't taking into account. We're randomly seeing birds fly by, and if we had a nest and we're able to park ourselves by it, like I photographed robust woodpeckers in Argentina, which is a relative of the Ivorybill. And of course, I got some nice shots, very easily identifiable, but there's a nest. They're flying to and from their nest, or.
Right. That's our whole search strategy is we basically, get out in the woods 30 minutes before first light.
I equate this to cuckoo bumblebees. So cuckoo bumblebees, they parasitize other bumblebee species, and they have a queen, and then they don't have any workers, right? So if you see a cuckoo bumblebee, that's you seeing a queen that currently has no home, just wandering on a flower, right? Whereas seeing a bomb, like some sort of a normal nesting bumblebee, those guys, you're near a nest because they don't forage too far away from their nests, and it's gonna be way easier to find something if you know if there's a nest nearby, and when there's something that's actually common. So like a couple days ago, I found a weird bumblebee. And I was like, I've never seen this species before. So I looked, and the reason why I was so confused by it was one of the cuckoo bumblebees. It was Bombus citrinus, the lemon cuckoo bumblebee. So yeah.
Well, good, thanks. Lauren's looking through the chat. This is a good question from Michael Carter. Would a small population of Ivorybills limit both their capacity to find a mate and also the hazards of a limited gene pool? Having said that, the fact sightings are coming in could be an indication that there may be a more robust population than we may believe. I'll address a little of that in that the Ivorybill is a very mobile bird. So I think there's fewer concerns about the interbreeding than there are, say, with a red-cockaded woodpecker. So the red-cockaded woodpecker, that's going to happen because they live in a concentrated colony. Anybody else want to?
The only concern I would have is with the South Carolina population, considering the fact that there's a lot less connection between South Carolina and the rest of the range, or what I consider to be the range, which is like out in the Mississippi alluvial plain. So the only problem would really be if you just had the South Carolina birds not interacting with any other birds. And that definitely could be happening, but I do feel like eventually there's going to be a little bit of traveling through some of the spores.
Okay.
Just jumping back here a little bit, if you have time for another question. My video and audio kind of cut out when you're discussing the habitat on Cuba. I think it was Tim, but I can't remember who. Could they repeat just what we know about the Cuban habitat for any type of woodpecker?
Well, I mean, where the Ivorybills were most recently seen there is in the mountains in the eastern Oriente province, above Guantanamo, basically, and it's pine forest. And but they used to nest in the lowlands too, but their habitat was destroyed down there.
Okay. Do we know if that pine forest Do we know if the pine forest in the highlands is still
I believe
there?
it was destroyed.
Yeah, it is. It's good.
Is it?
Good. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. They stopped logging in the 1980s. The Cuban government shut it down right away. But I mean, I don't know if they still have Ivorybills there or not, because I saw beetle-infested trees that were not getting, that weren't attracting in any Ivorybills. And at least in that part, and that whole area is only maybe 30 kilometers from one part of the mountain to the other. I mean, there's deep valleys and heavy, it takes hours to go anywhere there. But I was disappointed finding trees like that the birds weren't coming in and feeding on. So I left pretty discouraged from Cuba because it didn't have anywhere near the amount of area that we have here. But the habitat was good.
Yeah, that's good. Matthew had mentioned the 𝗕𝗺𝗯𝗶𝗵𝗵 and the storm damage. There are some great spots in the 𝗕𝗺𝗯𝗶𝗵, so yeah, we'll be tracking them down.
Hey, Matt,
Yeah.
somebody asked here, Carlo, don't Ivorybills have black and white underwings? Says these look white. And yes, they do have black and white underwings. In in those flybys, the white, everything's kind of, the white and leading edge and trailing edge are blurring together. That black is kind of small. They have the black wingtip of that line that goes through it. And we get a glimpse of that in that bird against the tree, where the left wing is kind of tilted toward me with the video camera. And we're seeing that blurry black tip there, and we're seeing some black line go down separating the two. So yes, he's right, they do. And a lot of it has to do, we're looking at a blurry video. The things just blur together.
Yeah. Thanks, Roshan, for the video, for the visual there. Yeah. Anybody else want to unmute themselves? I'm looking at, this is Steve Brower asks about historical record of ivory-bill cavities, especially partially pecked one, in what tree species?
Boy, there are so few.
Yeah.
I know that there's Arthur Allen.
We got one at Cornell. It was a maple. It was the one in that picture, the movie.
And then Arthur Allen had one in bald cypress. That was the one in 1924, I think.
Yes.
And then someone else had one also in bald cypress in the 1880s, something like that.
Yeah. So one of the things that Tanner's report was different from, so Arthur Allen was Jim Tanner's major professor, and Tanner said that he never, in his work in the Singer Tract in Louisiana, he never saw an ivory-bill even in a cypress. So interesting. Now, Teddy Roosevelt in 1907 in the book, and I look this, you can find this online. It's in the Louisiana canebrakes. Teddy Roosevelt describes having seen 3 ivory-bills just north of the Singer Tract in cypress trees. So that's a good question, but I don't think we have enough to make a judgment about preferences for trees.
Yeah, there is evidence to suggest that willow trees in the western part of the range, that willow trees are a very important nesting habitat.
That is interesting.
That's for more recent sightings.
Yeah. Anybody else want to unmute themselves? I think we answered most of the questions in the chat.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Bobby, you seen anything you feel we haven't answered?
Here's a question. Was there a great deal of size difference between the largest museum specimens we have and the smallest?
That's a good question. Variance.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bobby. You had a question, answer.
Yeah, I've looked at specimens from Florida all the way up into, I guess some of them came from Arkansas. The southern range, they are smaller, and they're about the. Let's compare them, say, to a pileated. An ivory-bill. Oh, how can I put this? They're a little smaller in the south, and a pileated, for example, from Michigan, it's a much larger pileated than we have in North Alabama or Arkansas, and it could be within an inch or so of a specimen from Florida. But if you take a Florida pileated and compare it to a ivory-bill from Arkansas, there's a good 2.5 inches or more difference in the size of the birds. I don't know if that answers your questions or if I answered it in a way you'd understand it, but the ivory-bills from Florida are smaller than ivory-bills further north in the range. And this thing, as animals and birds, as they get further north, they do have to have a larger body mass to stay warm in winter. I mean, that's a very common thing. Further north animals are, the larger they are. And it's the same thing with Ivorybills. Those further in Florida, especially in South Florida, were considerably smaller than ones further north in Arkansas and in the northern part of its range.
Yeah, the only exception I think of to that is the Tundrius peregrine falcon. They're the smallest, but they're actually, I consider them a South American species that just comes up to the Arctic to nest, so they don't have to worry about the cold.
Mm-hmm. You know, there was a, back in '05 when the announcement was made in Arkansas, there was a ornithologist from the American Museum of Natural History in New York. I guess he was a critic because he was holding a small, you could tell he had a smaller ivorybill from the southern part of the range, and he must have had it pileated from somewhere in Canada, because he was saying, look, there's no difference in the sizes.
That's cheap.
Yeah, I know. Like, how many
Yeah, you can't do that.
how many people is he deceiving? That's real science. That's purposely deceiving
Yeah.
individuals to gather them to your corner.
Yeah, a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
Here's another question. What parts of Mexico, because I thought someone mentioned possible Ivorybills in Mexico, what parts of Mexico are candidates?
Hey,
Yeah.
Josiah, I just want to let you know you've got Tim Gallagher who's written the book on the Imperials. So, Tim, you want to handle that? Yeah.
They live in the Sierra Madre Occidental, you know, like it's about 900 miles. This is the only place they're found, and it's in the high country. You know, you're up 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 feet even. They lived in the pine forest up there, and
It's not safe to be going up there right now.
no, I know. I had some really close calls. That was about 10 years ago, but it was really got more and more dangerous. And I finally had to promise my wife. After 5 trips down there, I had a real close call the last time, and she said no more.
Yeah.
I said, okay.
I guess the reason I ask is my brother's friend is in Mexico. Probably not the right region. I think it's a deserty region, but it's close to Morelia, I guess. But he invited my brother and I to go out and enjoy a Mexican holiday in his home village. And we're considering it, and although we're a little bit worried about the safety.
Yeah.
I was like, I should keep my eyes for Imperials down there.
I mean, I had friends in Mexico and they were always saying, don't come now, maybe next year will be better. And it was always like 10 times worse. And I finally started going down there, and had some really, I mean, you run into people with AK-47s, and, you know, you're walking through places and you walk past some place where they're growing opium poppies and marijuana and stuff. And, you know, try to tell them, hey, I don't care. I'm just looking for birds. They really don't want you to be there.
I just imagine that when I'm out in the rural parts of Louisiana and someone will ask me what I'm doing, and I'll say I'm looking for a woodpecker. You know, I get this strange look, and they'll say, and then I'll ask them, do you know where the really big trees are? And they'll say, well, if you really are looking for a woodpecker, and then they'll answer it. But that's a less contentious situation. Tim, are there any American records, ancient records of Imperials? Did they ever make it into Southern California? Do we know of?
No, John Gould, when he did, and I've seen these type specimens, they're in England. He was the artist in the 1700s. And he said they were from this remote part of California, blah, blah, blah. But he bought them off someone else. And I really don't believe they're from California. Yeah. And there's no record. And even in Arizona, I've always thought, God, in the northernmost part of the Sierra Madre Occidental, you can see the Chiricahuas in the distance. Why aren't they over there, you know?
You know, there was a cavalry officer who actually looked for them there and never found them.
Yeah, I know. And during the Apache Wars, I mean, this is way back.
And he thought they would be there also.
Yeah, yeah.
And he did search for them, but did not find any.
And I know other people who have, and it'd just be so wonderful because it's a more protected area.
Yeah.
Anything can happen in Mexico, you know.
Tim, are the imperials in Mexico the same species as the Cuban imperial, or a different?
There's no, it's not a Cuban imperial.
The Cuban, officially now, the Cuban is still considered a subspecies of the
But it
Ivorybill, and they're about the same size and everything. But I mean, they did some DNA work, and they seem to be more closely related to the imperial. The last ones they saw were even in the pine forest, which, you know, they've never had. I mean, in the mountains of Cuba, and you know, as far as we know, the American Ivorybill, it's always in the lowlands. So,
okay,
but
the imperial.
But
Go ahead,
you know,
Don.
the imperial is a huge woodpecker. It's a lot bigger than an Ivorybill. You know, it's like a raven almost. I mean, they're huge.
Yeah.
Like third
Don,
bigger.
yeah. Great. Don, did you have a question? Don Reed, go ahead.
Yeah, when we look at the historical range of the Ivorybill, I know that western Kentucky area, the Jackson Purchase area there, which is about 500 miles from where some of the research was done in Arkansas, the habitat has improved.
Mm-hmm.
So, to my knowledge, there's no research or reported sightings in these areas. But what's the potential for these areas to repopulate with Ivorybills as they migrate or fly from areas? And I've noticed on some of the readings I've done when researchers and scientists and birders go in these areas where they've had sightings, the Ivorybills, just from the reading seem to me that after a while, the sightings, they no longer are seeing them, so they're moving out. It may be because we're going into their habitat and they're nervous, and so they just relocate to another slough or another area in that habitat. But West Kentucky has 8,000 acres in a wildlife refuge out there with ball cypress in it.
Right.
And the habitat is there. So is there any research going on in these areas, that historical ranges, where people are going back and searching and looking for populations?
Well, I tell you, I've searched Western Tennessee fairly recently. I'm not sure of anybody who's working Western Kentucky right now, but the Ivorybill, you know, it's sort of like the circus. Once it's a disaster species, you know, wherever there may be food sources. So I certainly wouldn't rule out Western Kentucky.
And you know, it was always my hope that enough of them would breed to where they'd expand to other places. But you know, they must be. I think their numbers are really low personally, and it's taken a long time.
Tim, the one thing I would say about that is that I graphed out all of the sightings of every Ivorybill in every state by decade, and if you look, the Mississippi alluvial plain populations have been decreasing, but it looks like the South Carolina population. I'm just assuming that these sightings are not mistaken identity, but I only picked out the ones that I really believe in. And the South Carolina one really just popped up in the 80s and started going up, and the 2000s had the most sightings ever in South Carolina. So that's maybe evidence that Ivorybills moved into the area after being extirpated.
But I think as far as formal researchers and stuff, they have to wait until there's some,
No, there's no data here. There's no data.
We've tried these blanket searches all across the South, and you've got to have focused ones, and you've got to have someone, maybe a handful of people have had some really good sightings somewhere, and then descend on that area and really search it.
Yeah, like the Patagonia picnic table effect.
Yeah.
Huh. Tim, I think I confused you with my question earlier. I was asking about the imperials in Mexico, not a Cuban ivorybill in Mexico. Are the imperials, so were imperials in Cuba at one point, which are probably extinct, and you were searching for imperials in Mexico. Is that correct?
Yes. I
And
don't
those
know.
are the-
I don't know the connection between Cuba and the imperials of Mexico. You know, there's been lots of speculation over the years about how those birds even got to Cuba.
Yeah,
know.
it's really weird because there's also there's a prehistoric species from Texas that supports that they went
Right.
that let's say the primitive Ivorybills, imperial like things, they went over the Gulf Coast. But then you have the Cuban Ivorybills, which seem to be a more direct link to the imperials. So
Yeah.
it's possible that actually two different shoots went off, and one formed the Cuban Ivorybills, and the other one went through Texas and went to the normal Ivorybills.
Well, it could be, and it's such a long period of time, you know. Yeah.
Tim, are you saying that that imperials were first in Mexico and made their way to Cuba based on what you were saying?
Well, I'm looking at it like this: the 𝗕𝗃𝗃𝗃 genus is a South American species, you know, genus, and you know, moving northward or whatever. Maybe as the weather, you know, the ice age receded, that kind of thing. I mean, looking way back in geologic time, and so I mean, they're all related, of course. A Magellanic and a robust woodpecker and palebill, they're all related to imperials and ivorybills. And yeah, I'm sure the imperial is the same bloodline as our ivorybills in the south and the ones in Cuba. It's just like they're saying, there seems to be closer genetic link between, you know, just based on the DNA work. And that was a surprise to a lot of people.
Yeah, the ABA had the Cuban Ivorybill and the American Ivorybill as separate species into the 80s, or
Right.
something like that. And I think they should split them again. I don't think it's helping. Like, having people not doing, I've had people say, like some of my other birding friends have been like, oh, there's no need to search in the US. There's not enough habitat here. And the ones in Cuba are probably there. But that's not helping anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
I've got a friend named Mike Kerwin. He's
That's
like,
just the opposite. We have much better habitat here and less habitat in Cuba.
I think that's the ICUN. I think that's their position, is that it could still exist in Cuba and it's extinct in the United States.
Well, I know, and I that surprises me, because even, you know,
a lot of people say that.
And the other people had their sightings. That area, they have rangers working there constantly, and if they could find an ivorybill, those guys would be famous. They'd be in such good shape with their government and all that, and they live there. And I've interacted with those guys and gone through the mountains with them. They're really, really good, and they haven't seen any. You know, the latest I could find people who'd seen one was like the late 1980s. You know.
Yeah. Good.
And Mark Lambert went there in like 1991 and, you know, didn't find any. Spent 3 months there.
Were the imperials in Cuba larger or smaller than those from Mexico?
Why do you call them imperials though?
Because there were imperials and ivorybills in Cuba. Correct?
No,
I don't know what you're talking about, honestly.
No, just to be clear, so there's the
imperials.
There's 𝗕𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. So the American Ivorybill is 𝗕𝗃𝗃𝗃 principalis. The Cuban Ivorybill is still 𝗕𝗃𝗃𝗃 principalis, and then still considered a subspecies, 𝗕𝗏𝗏. And then the Mexican bird is the 𝗕𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 imperialis.
Okay.
So again, I guess. Go ahead.
I guess I got myself confused. So there were never imperials in Cuba. Imperials have always been a Mexican bird.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Tim. That's why I was confusing you. I thought there were imperials and ivorybills in Cuba, and then imperials in Mexico. So sorry, my research was a little faulty there.
No worries. Yeah. Yeah. Although again, the DNA is beginning to show that the the imperial is probably more closely related.
Nowadays,
to
I just call them 𝗕𝗕𝗄𝑠 𝗵𝗵𝐵𝑟𝑑, Principalis and Imperialis.
Any other questions? We've kept Tim and Bobby and everybody here over 2 hours, so we really appreciate y'all.
Matt,
yeah.
could you repeat what you were about to say about the DNA? What DNA was showing? You were just going to say.
The DNA is shown. This has been a few years ago. That actually, even though certainly the American ivorybill and the Cuban ivorybill, and from a plumage perspective, look almost identical. The DNA shows that the Cuban ivorybill is probably much more closely related to the imperial of Mexico.
That's not necessarily what it showed. It just showed that each of them were an equal distance apart. So if you're going to say that the American ivorybill is a separate species from the imperial, then you must also say that the Cuban ivorybill is a separate species from the American.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yep. Good. Any other questions? This has been great.
I have a question. Can you hear me, Matt?
Yeah, go ahead, Teresa.
I want to know your thoughts on. First, I got to say thank you for all these Zooms. I have learned so much. And I'm from the Great Black Swamp.
Yeah.
I have and through all the studying and the learning I've done, I've looked at the pileated range, and there's an area that basically borders the area of the Great Black Swamp that is not included in the pileated range. And you know what I'm speaking of because that's where I had my sighting, okay?
Uh-huh.
And I'm just wondering why that is, if anybody had any thoughts on that, because, in all those 15 years, feeding the birds in the pines, woodpeckers had every single kind of other woodpecker there, but no pileated.
Honestly, Teresa, I didn't know there was a gap in the eastern United States in the pileated range.
It almost follows the range of the Wisconsin glaciation. And the more I've been learning also is that is my area is in the Cedar Creek watershed, which is also considered one of the most unique watersheds in the world, according to somebody.
Yeah.
Just putting it out there.
No, that data helps. Thanks. Any other questions, observations? We'll give you a 3-minute warning. This has been so fantastic, Bobby. Bobby, the first time I saw that bird enter the screen, I was sure it was an ivorybill. And again, I think a lot of us
I looked at that video. I looked at the tail. The tail just looks like a dagger. I feel like that really does stick out to me. It looks like a pintail. It looks like a weird black pintail with white on the underwing.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for hosting this.
Yeah. Hey, Bobby, any closing comments you want to make?
Tell Fish and Wildlife to take this bird off the delisting proposal.
We've done that.
My uncle already has.
Okay, good. All right, y'all. Thank y'all so much.
Okay.
I'll see you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night, y'all.
Good
Good night.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.